Today, I want to talk a little bit about President Biden's 3 proposed constitutional amendments that he's just proposed yesterday regarding the Supreme Court and presidential immunity. 3 separate provisions, and although he didn't actually say he wants to amend the Constitution, at least 2 of these and probably all 3 will require a constitutional amendment. The first provision that he proposed is that presidential immunity should be overridden. So if you watched our recent video or if you've read the decision regarding Trump v. United States, there's a decision from the Supreme Court saying that presidents receive pretty broad immunity within their presidential powers against any criminal liability after they leave office. A lot of people have been outraged about this decision, and a lot of people have been in support of the decision, and I would encourage you, if you have a strong position, that you actually read the decision, because these are actually pretty complicated issues. Our Constitution provides that our unitary executive, our president, has broad powers to be the commander-in-chief, to make sure the laws are faithfully executed, to veto certain types of legislation. The real concern is that if we start criminalizing what the president does that we think is controversial, that could really rob the presidency of its power. Imagine if President Obama were prosecuted for the drone strikes that he authorized when he was president. Imagine if President Biden were prosecuted as soon as he leaves office for the way that he uses his pardon power or the way that he chose not to enforce certain regulations at the border because he didn't think they were good laws. Imagine if President Trump, we don't have to imagine it, he is being prosecuted for various things he said while president. A lot of the things he's being prosecuted for are just for his speech as president of the United States. These are obviously concerning precedents and opportunities for abuse. So none of us really wants a president who is above the law, but the immunity has been held to say that if the president is acting within his core powers that the Constitution gives him in Article 2, that he cannot be prosecuted for actions that are just exercises of those powers. He can still be prosecuted for other crimes, such as taking a bribe or doing something that's clearly outside of the scope of those powers. So President Biden is now suggesting that we should have a constitutional amendment to eliminate that immunity. And I think the concern there is it's hard to know how broad that could get and how quickly that could be abused by the party that takes power, kicks the president out of office, and then has him prosecuted. That's something that we haven't really done in our history. The second proposal is about the Supreme Court. President Biden has suggested that we should have term limits on the Supreme Court. So all of our federal judges currently enjoy life tenure. Article 3 says that the judges shall enjoy their offices during good behavior, which is just another way of saying unless they, murder a man or commit some sort of serious crime or accept bribes, that they continue on in their role. By the way, judges get the same kind of broad immunity in their offices that the president gets in his. So the question is, should we term limit them? Should we say that there's a limit on how long they can serve? President Biden notes that the 22nd Amendment put a term limit on presidents. You can check out our videos on the 22nd Amendment for more on that. And so he says that there's no reason the Supreme Court shouldn't also have term limits. But of course, we don't have term limits on any other federal office in terms of our senators or our congressmen or the vice president. And so it's a new idea that he's proposing there. He also thinks that this is unusual in the world. They canvassed the world and said there's no other high court that has life tenure for its judges. I don't know whether that's true or not. But what certainly is true is that changing it to have 18-year terms, basically where every 2 years a president would appoint a new justice, would require a constitutional amendment. It would require a change to Article 3. The president's provision is only about the Supreme Court. He's not proposed that for all of the other federal judges in office. There are some pros and cons to doing a rotating system like that. One that the president points out is that it would mean that the timing of appointing justices is less arbitrary. As it is, we wait for somebody to die or resign, and sometimes a whole presidential term goes by without an appointment, and sometimes a president gets to appoint 3. So that's a little bit unusual and maybe something that some people feel is a bug in the system. Another reason it might be a positive is we tend to get very young Supreme Court justices who then develop while on the court. That means that a justice can serve. Many of our justices have served for 20 plus years, some for more than 30 years in the past. So maybe having a system where they only serve for 18 years would mean that we would get the benefit of some older appointments. A Democratic president is not likely to appoint a 55-year-old justice to the court because that's less time for them to impact the court. If they have 18-year terms, we might get some of those more seasoned judges from lower courts to be appointed to the Supreme Court. So those are some pros to the system. Some cons to the system are, and this might sound a little strange, we don't actually pay our Supreme Court justices that much. One of the reasons we've typically given them life tenure is, can you imagine one of our polarizing justices now trying to go back into the workforce? There would be a lot of reasons why they may not be able to go out and have a normal career after that. We're asking them to give up a lot in terms of taking a position where they're not paid as much as they could make in the private sector. And in exchange, we've typically said we give them life tenure so they don't have to worry about that when they retire. Some people may not have a lot of sympathy for Supreme Court justices, and that's fine. That's up to you. But we've typically said that the judiciary, the federal judiciary, by being insulated, by having life tenure, by being essentially unremovable other than by impeachment for high crimes and misdemeanors, as a result of all of that, we believe that our judiciary is more independent, more willing to take on special interests, more willing to strike down laws that they should strike down under the Constitution. Whether you believe that's working or not may be a separate question, but that's the reason that we've always had life tenure. So I'm sure that will be hotly debated, and at any rate, it's going to require an amendment. The third provision that the president has proposed is a little bit more unclear in terms of what it would require. He's suggested a code of conduct for the Supreme Court. This comes in response to several of the justices allegedly taking gifts or taking trips that were paid for by different people, and it's a little bit unclear maybe who paid for it, or there's questions about whether that could impact their judgment in sort of attenuated ways. Doing that, having a code of conduct might be something that Congress could pass, but it's a little bit unclear as to how they could enforce it. So, for example, if Congress passes a rule that says Supreme Court justices have to show up 9 to 5 and work in their offices, if they don't do it, what can Congress do? Well, nothing other than what we've already said. They can impeach those justices. And absent that, Congress doesn't have any real oversight authority over the Supreme Court. Chief Justice Roberts has expressed skepticism as to whether Congress has any power as a co-equal branch to regulate the Supreme Court in this way. And it's unclear if the Supreme Court would have to be the one to pass a code of conduct that would be binding. I think this sets up a real separation of powers issue. And of course, ironically, you know who's going to decide whether it's a violation of the separation of powers. It's the 9 justices who are being regulated. So it's a little bit of a questionable area for the Congress to try to dip into. The president has made his call. Whether that's taken up by a bill or something else is different. But all of this should raise the question of whether we should be pursuing amendments on one of these 3 topics. So check out our other videos on constitutional amendments. We think that the amendment process should be used more often. So it's great to see a president make proposals, even if you disagree with them. It's good to see our process working. We should be thinking about how we can make the Constitution better. And for that, at least, we commend President Biden for putting forward proposals and helping people to think about how we can improve the Constitution.